At 1:30 on the morning of April 1st, 1946, the remote Scotch Cap radio station on Unimak Island in Alaska, Chief Hopeson Sanford was reading in bed when the building was rocked by a powerful earthquake. The night was clear and calm, and the station creaked and groaned as the earth moved below it. After about 30 to 35 seconds, the shaking stopped. A few objects fell off of shelves, but the building seemed to be okay. Sanford made his rounds, but he found the station undamaged. He looked out at the shadow of the mountains looming outside. The area just to the north was dotted with volcanoes, and Sanford knew that this could be the sign of an eruption. But the mountains stood peacefully in the night. The rest of the crew was awakened by the quake. Sanford phoned the nearby Scotch Cap Light Station, located just down the hill. They were rattled as well, but they were unharmed. They said that they would attempt to contact the Dutch Harbor Navy radio to see if they had any information about the earthquake. At 1:57, the station was hit with an aftershock that felt even more powerful than the initial quake. It only lasted about 15 to 20 seconds. Sanford again inspected the building, and again looked out at the towering volcanoes to the north. There was no major damage, and no signs of an eruption. By now the crew had gathered in the recreation hall, all excited by the quakes. The lighthouse was phoned once again, and they too were rattled by the aftershock, but unscathed. The men continued discussing the excitement of the night until around 2:18, when they suddenly became aware of an unnatural roar coming from the ocean. The roar quickly intensified, like a great blast of energy, until suddenly the building was rocked by a heavy blow. Immediately, water came rushing in with about 3 inches covering the floor. Just as quickly as it had started, the roar faded away, and the night was once again calm. Sanford ordered the building evacuated and sent his crew to a building higher up on the mountain. He then raced to the control room to send out an emergency message. He went outside and looked down at the darkness, where the Scotch Cap light once illuminated the night. In his log he wrote, "Lights extinguished and horn silent. I believed Scotch Cap Light Station was lost."
I still find many people who think that Alaska was a useless acquisition. I can merely adduce a few simple facts in answer. Each year, the original purchase price of Alaska has come out of the great 590,000 square miles of territory in its gold output alone.
The Aleutian Islands stretch over 1,200 miles from the Alaskan Peninsula to the east coast of Russia. The island chain acts as a natural barrier between the Bering Sea to the north and the Pacific Ocean to the south. It's one of the most seismically active regions in the world, with 57 volcanoes forming the northern edge of the Pacific Ring of Fire. While indigenous people have lived and traveled throughout the islands for thousands of years, the region was first visited by Russian explorers in 1741. Despite establishing a few sporadic settlements, the heavily indebted Russian Empire ultimately found little use in the Alaskan territory and eventually sold the land to the United States in 1867 for $7.2 million. By the turn of the century, commerce in the region was picking up, prompting a growing need for navigational aids in Alaska's notoriously treacherous waterways. In 1901, Congress authorized the construction of 11 lighthouses in the territory, to be operated by the United States Lighthouse Service. Construction began in 1902 on the first 2 beacons at Sentinel Island and Five Finger Island in Alaska's Inside Passage. The 3rd station would be built in the Aleutians on Unimak Island, the largest island in the chain, coming in at 1,571.41 square miles, over 500 square miles larger than the state of Rhode Island. A site was selected at Scotch Cap at the southwest tip of the island. This marked the entrance to the Unimak Pass, the main passage through the Aleutians from the North Pacific to the Bering Sea. an important shipping channel, it is said to be one of the foggiest places on Earth. An additional light would be built at Sereshif Cape at the northwest end of the island to help guide ships through the treacherous passage. They would be the two most remote and westernmost lighthouses in the United States. Construction at Scotch Cap was a major challenge, and it was difficult to devise a plan that could remain on budget. Initial bids for the project were rejected because they were all deemed too expensive. Finally, on June 23, 1902, the 665-ton steamer Homer was chartered for the project. Loaded with materials, 30 hired hands, and a doctor, the steamer departed Seattle on June 30th and arrived at the site on July 13th. The steamer made 2 more trips to deliver additional materials, and work continued until it was paused on November 27th for the winter. Despite the conditions, the project moved quickly, and the station was already nearly finished when work was paused. The Homer returned to the station on May 10, 1903, and the light was put into operation on June 18th. While the fog signal, a 10-inch air whistle, was meant to be completed in July, a number of issues delayed operation until September. The station cost $76,571 to build. The original lighthouse consisted of a simple octagonal wooden structure with a 45-foot tower rising from the center. Its fixed white light was housed in a third-order Fresnel lens that sat 90 feet above the sea. In addition to the lighthouse, the station included a number of outbuildings and 3 modest dwellings. From its earliest days of operation, the lighthouse's intense isolation was only punctuated by a series of dramatic shipwrecks. The Scotch Cap Light was operated by 5 keepers, with 4 on active duty and 1 on leave at all times, though these numbers fluctuated over the years. At most lighthouses, keepers were able to live with their families, but due to its remote location, Scotch Cap was an unaccompanied light station. Keepers were usually bachelors or widowers, and they were required to pass a rigorous physical examination before their service began. They would live and work at the isolated lighthouse for 3 years, followed by a full year of paid leave. When the U.S. Light Service was absorbed into the Coast Guard on July 1, 1939, service at the lighthouse was reduced to a 1-year commitment, with an extra 30 days paid leave in addition to the standard 30 days given to all keepers. Even with the extra time off, it was an incredibly challenging assignment. Heavy surf made landing ships at the lighthouse difficult. Mail and supply deliveries were infrequent, often coming once every few months. In the years after the lighthouse opened, these deliveries were soon dropped from planes, which had an easier time reaching the island. The food was simple but adequate, and the stores at the station were kept well stocked to account for skipped deliveries. The biggest challenge facing the men at Scotch Cap was isolation. Aside from occasional meetings with the men stationed at Cape Sereshif, 22 miles to the north, the men of Scotch Cap were on their own. Some coped with the intense isolation better than others. But for the most part, these men knew what they were signing up for, and they made the best of the situation. The intense weather conditions created constant maintenance demands, and work to keep the beacon shining and fog signal droning was constant. Still, the men had plenty of spare time to go hunting, read, play cards, take photos, and enjoy the rugged beauty of their surroundings. While the 2 stations proved an asset to vessels navigating the Unimak Pass, Scotch Cap and Cape Sereshif couldn't entirely eliminate the dangers of the treacherous waterway. In just a few short years, the deadly pass proved the necessity of the beacons. In 1909, a cannery supply ship called the Columbia wrecked near the island. Her 194 crew members managed to evacuate the sinking ship. They sheltered at the light station for 2 weeks before a ship could arrive to take them off the island. In 1930, during a brutal snowstorm, a Japanese freighter called the Kushin Maru ran aground on the beach only a few hundred yards from the lighthouse. Again, the keepers aided the crew until they could be rescued. During World War II, a Russian freighter called the Turksib became separated from a passing convoy during a rough storm on December 31, 1942. The ship eventually stranded on a beach approximately 5 miles east of Scotch Cap. A U.S. Navy salvage ship called USS Rescuer was dispatched from Dutch Harbor to pull the ship free. But in the chaos of the storm, the Rescuer slammed into an uncharted reef and was wrecked. Her third engineer was thrown overboard and drowned in the roiling sea. The Turksib soon began breaking apart in the punishing storm-addled surf. Her captain was decapitated when a massive wave slammed into her bridge, separating the structure from the ship. Her chief engineer also lost his life while trying to establish a line to the shore. Her 60 remaining crew members finally made it to the shore and spent several weeks at the light station, while a seemingly endless storm delayed their rescue. The captain and chief engineer's bodies were recovered and buried near the light station. Earlier in 1942, an Alaskan Steamship Company vessel, SS Mount McKinley, wrecked near Senate Point, 6 miles east of the lighthouse. Everyone on board was rescued, but the wrecked ship remained on the beach for years. One Scotch Cap keeper stationed at the lighthouse in 1943 remembered meeting up with the crew of Cape Sarasheef on calm days and walking to the wreck. They would explore the derelict vessel and even play the grand piano that still sat in her saloon. Over the years, Scotch Cap received numerous upgrades. In 1922, the station received radio telephones, providing a valuable link to the outside world. Between 1930 and 1931, a radio direction finding station was established on the bluff above the lighthouse. The new technology made navigating the pass significantly easier. The radio station also more than doubled the number of men assigned to the station. Numbers fluctuated throughout the years, but more than a dozen men were stationed at Scotch Cap at any one time, and those numbers increased significantly during World War II, when the station took on a greater strategic importance. Unlike other islands in the Aleutians, Unimak never saw any direct conflict. But even in the years leading up to the war, as commerce continued to increase through the Unimak Pass, it became clear that the aging wooden lighthouse would need to be replaced. In 1940, $200,000 was allocated to the construction of a brand new, reinforced concrete structure that would go up right beside the original octagonal lighthouse. Plans for the new light were almost directly copied from the Sandhills Lighthouse on Keweenaw Peninsula in Michigan. The new lighthouse would be self-contained, eliminating the need for many of the original outbuildings in the 3 old wooden houses. These buildings, along with the original wooden lighthouse, were destroyed after the Lantern Room and third-order Fresnel lens were transferred to the gleaming new white lighthouse. Its base stood 50 feet above the sea at high tide, and its focal length stood at 110 feet. The solid white light was given a new signature, flashing on for 3 seconds at 15-second intervals. The beacon was visible up to 15 miles away. The new structure was a significant improvement over what stood before. Strong, reinforced, and sitting high above the sea, the tower was designed to weather the fierce wind, rain, snow, and surf that pounded at its walls. With proper maintenance, it would easily stand for 100 years. It wouldn't last a decade. 1:30 on the morning of April 1st, 1946, the seafloor on the northern slope of the Aleutian Trench gave way to the enormous force of the tectonic plates below. The violent shift produced a powerful earthquake that was recorded all over the world. The shaking lasted for about a minute. Though estimates vary, the earthquake is believed to have been a magnitude 8.6, originating some 13,000 feet below sea level, 90 miles south of Unimak Island. At the radio direction finding station at Scotch Cap, the men were used to the occasional tremor. Their station sat in one of the most seismically active regions in the world. But this one was especially jarring, enough to wake the men and generate a great deal of excitement and anxiety. Station Chief Hoban Sanford was awake when the tremor shook the building. He recorded in the official log that the building creaked and groaned loudly, and objects were knocked off shelves. The shaking terrified some of the crew, and a couple even ran out of the building into the cold night, fearing that it could collapse. But after an inspection, no major damage was found, and the men were safe. The 5 keepers stationed at the lighthouse only a few yards away, headed by Chief Boatswain Anthony L. Petit, probably experienced something similar. The other keepers included Motor Machinist Mate 2nd Class Leonard Pickering, Fireman 1st Class Jack Coven, Seaman 1st Class Dewey Dykstra, and Seaman 1st Class Paul J. Ness. The tower was inspected, but no major damage was found. The light continued its steady rhythm. 3 seconds on, 15 seconds off. While the night was calm and clear, the foghorn droned its steady rhythm, belching out a deep guttural blast at regular intervals, a drone that all within earshot would have been very used to. Scotch Cap sits just south of Westall Peak, a 5,426-foot tall volcano with dozens of recorded eruptions. Mount Sheldon in the middle of the island is the tallest of the Aleutians at 9,373 feet. It's also an active volcano and known to erupt frequently. Sanford's first reaction to the quake was to look out at the mountains looming to the north to see if one had blown its top. But the peaks all appeared calm. Less than half an hour later, the station was rocked by a powerful aftershock that Sanford claimed felt stronger than the initial quake. Still, no damage was found at the station, and the mountains did not appear to be causing the shaking. But now the men had all gathered in the recreation hall. Some were excited by the activity, others were terrified. The radio station buzzed with the electric anxiety, and suddenly an ungodly roar filled the room. Before anyone could figure out its source, the entire station was rocked by a massive crushing blow. Very quickly, about 3 inches of water rushed across the floor. A bizarre occurrence for a building situated high atop a bluff, over 100 feet above the sea. Sanford immediately ordered the men to move to higher ground, and he rushed to the control room to send out an emergency message to the Kodiak and Attic Net control stations. He realized what had happened. The Scotch Cap station had been hit by what was then called a tidal wave. Today, we would call it a tsunami. As the men raced up the hill to safety, they looked back at the roiling sea and the gleaming white lighthouse tower. To their astonishment, all they saw was night. The light was dark, and the foghorn was silent. Soon after, as the men returned to their badly damaged station, Sanford went out to the edge of the bluff and looked down to where the lighthouse once stood. He saw only scattered debris. Fearing that more waves could hit and needing to address the damage to his own post, he returned to the station and worked to clean up the water and repair the damaged generators. Finally, at 7 a.m., the sea had returned to its normal state, and Sanford and his crew ventured down to the ruined lighthouse. They found a scene of utter devastation. The lighthouse was completely gone, reduced to nothing but its ruined foundation. it was clear that no one could have survived the impact. It's estimated that the wave, possibly strengthened by a local submarine landslide, reached an incredible 138 feet when it smashed at full force into Unimak Island. The 5 Scotch Cap Lighthouse keepers never stood a chance. Sanford and his men searched for traces of the men. On the hill behind the lighthouse, they found a human foot, severed at the ankle. Not far away, they found what appeared to be someone's intestine, and what they believed might have been someone's kneecap. That was all that was found that morning. Everything else was likely swept out to sea. The men spent much of the morning searching the beaches for the missing men, but they found nothing. Cape Sarasheef Lighthouse was contacted. The twin station emerged the night unscathed. In the coming days and weeks, daily search parties were sent out, but only one body was ever found. Though badly disfigured, he was finally identified as Seaman First Class Paul Ness, based only on his high cheekbones and his goatee. Eventually, a thigh and another foot were found. Paul's body and the other body parts were buried near the graves of the 2 Russian sailors buried 4 years before. But they were soon disinterred and sent to the continental United States for a permanent burial. It was the worst loss of life at any land-based Coast Guard light station in history. The 1946 Aleutians earthquake sent shockwaves throughout the Pacific. Energy from the quake traveled through the sea at an incredible 500 miles per hour. Waves were detected as far south as Antarctica. The Hawaiian Islands, thousands of miles away, bore the brunt of the destructive force. The first waves hit Kauai 4.5 hours after the initial quake. 20 minutes later, the waves hit Hilo. The island was devastated. 488 buildings were completely destroyed, and 936 were damaged. As the waves approached the island, the bay seemed to empty out, drawing people eager to catch a glimpse of the strange phenomenon closer to the deadly sea. 159 people lost their lives in the Hawaiian Islands. 96 of them were in Hilo. The widespread devastation demonstrated the need for advanced warning systems to prevent future tragedies. This prompted the creation of the Seismic Sea Wave Warning System, which became the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center in 1965. At Scotch Cap, the disaster signaled the end of regular manned service at the station. A temporary automated beacon was established at the site only weeks after the tragedy, and the radio station crew was relocated at the end of April. By the early 1950s, a more permanent light and fog signal was built higher up on the hill. While a small crew continued to work at Scotch Cap for another 2 decades, the station was completely automated and unmanned in 1971. Today, only about 60 people still live on Unimak. 93% of the island has been designated as a wilderness preserve to protect its natural beauty and the wildlife that make Alaska special. The shattered foundation of the Scotch Cap Lighthouse remains on the beach at the southeast tip of the island. A somber reminder of an almost entirely forgotten tragedy and the 5 men who lost their lives when the natural world flexed its deadly might. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, support the channel with a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd like to give a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon and my channel members. Their support helps keep the channel afloat. Alright crew, that's all I've got. Until the next one, be nice to people.